What am I going to be reading in August, you ask? Well, I'll tell ya. Hi pals, Alicia here. I hope you are doing well. And if you're new here, this is the place where we talk about books. Today I'm going to go through the books I plan to read in the month of August. Normally every month I do a D20 challenge where I have this D&D D20 die that I roll 3 times, and then each number that comes up on the die has a prompt associated with it. I will link the original video above that goes through all 20 prompts, and then I'll also list the 20 prompts below for your convenience. So I will be rolling this. I will roll it 3 times. But before I do that, I am also so excited to be doing the Spooky Smart Bitch Readathon this month. This is a month-long readathon hosted by Jordaline at Jordaline Reads and Kat at Biblio Obscura. I will link both of their channels below. It is a month-long readathon, and month-long readathons are my favorite ones because I feel like those are the most realistic in terms of actually successfully doing all of the challenges. And this readathon is just about loving what's spooky, being smart, being a spooky smart bitch. And I am thrilled about the prompts. Making my TBR was so much fun. So I'm gonna go through my TBR for that first, and then roll the last 3 roll the die 3 times and see what comes up for those. So without further ado, let's find out what this spooky smart bitch will be reading in August. So the first prompt in the readathon is to read a translated horror novel. And for this one, I am so excited to finally be getting to The Crimson Labyrinth by Yusuke Kishi. This was published in 2006. And this is a game show horror, which is the exact niche of horror that I am obsessed with. I'm getting Cube vibes from this. The back cover says that this book is Lost meets Battle Royale, which just sounds absolutely perfect. And this is about a man who wins his entry onto a reality game show called the Mars Labyrinth. I thought it was called the Crimson Labyrinth because that's what the book is called, but it is actually called the Mars Labyrinth. So he goes into this Mars Labyrinth. He's expecting, you know, reality TV, fun and games, fame, hopefully winning some, you know, money out of it. And then apparently things just go not the way that he had planned from there. So I'm expecting I'm expecting like Battle Royale, like last one out alive wins. The groups of people got to use their individual special skills to find their way out of this labyrinth. I am assuming there's going to be death and mayhem and just wackiness going on, possibly televised for the world. Who knows? I'm really excited to find out. Crimson Labyrinth is what I am picking for a translated horror novel. The second readathon prompt is to read a book that is written by a Black, Indigenous, or person of color author, or centering a Black, Indigenous, or person of color main character, and I have found a book that does both. I will be reading The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle. This is a short novella that was published in 2016, and this is a retelling of an H.P. Lovecraft short story. I think it was called something like The Curse at Red Hook, or The Story at Red Hook. I will list the actual title here. And this is a retelling of that short story. Victor LaValle has tried to, you know, revamp that story and make it less racist. So this is about a small-time hustler in the 20s in Harlem. His name is Thomas Tester. He lives his life as a street musician, just kind of making ends meet, and then he kind of gets wrapped up in this almost like magical plot with this really rich guy. There's like magic, there's skullduggery, all in jazz era, jazz age New York. So this kind of has a mix of horror and fantasy, and you know, there's there's magic. So I'm expecting kind of weird fiction from this, very Lovecraftian style. And I read my first book by Victor LaValle last month and I loved it. So I am really excited to get to this one. The third prompt is to read a horror novel that is published between the 70s, sometime in the 70s, 80s, or 90s. So for this one, I will be reading Off Season by Jack Ketchum. This was published in 1980, so like right perfectly in the middle. I believe this was his first book, I could be wrong. And this is about a cannibal family that lives in the woods somewhere around New York, and a family that goes on vacation into this area, and then just the horror movie that ensues from that. This book has a lot of like notoriety around it because after it was published, the world was like, no, Jack Ketchum, this is too much and we do not want this. This is too violent. This is too gory. This is too obscene. Please take it back. So they republished this book, taking out a bunch of key, not necessarily key, I don't even know, maybe they were key, but it took out a whole bunch of scenes that made this book what it was, just to make people be able to sleep at night because of it. And then decades went by and then publishers were like, nah, let's re-release it the way it was meant to be. So this is the uncensored version that I will be reading. I'm excited to read. I mean, it's always that thing where when they say, no, you can't read it, that's when you're like, well, I gotta now. Now I absolutely gotta. So I really want to see what made everybody so upset, and I want to see what made them take it back to hell, I guess. So I will be reading Off Season by Jack Ketchum. Really excited about a cabin in the woods, cannibal-y plot. This seems very summery. Seems like a nice summer read for August. Next is to read a horror book written by a female author. We all love female horror. Some of the best stories are written by female authors. And for this, I will be reading a new to me author. I will be reading Let's Play White by Chesia Burke. This is a horror anthology short story collection published in 2011. And I love short story collections, and I love short story collections for readathons because you can really, you know, section them out. Just read them here, read them there, read them everywhere until you finish the collection. These raw, brutal stories, often with intriguingly open endings, display an odd and unsettling relationship to the poetry of violence. These dark tales announce the arrival of a formidable new master of the macabre. Yeah, I'm really excited to get to this. I don't know much about this collection, but that's just making me even more excited to get into it. Horror, anthology, short story collection, gritty, brutal, macabre, written by a female author. Heck yes, please don't tell me any more. Just let me read it. So I'll be reading Let's Play White. Next is to read a horror novel that is 400 pages or longer, and I did have a lot of choices for this, but I chose to do the thing that was kindest for me, and I will be reading Uzumaki by Junji Ito, which is a horror manga. It is like 650 pages, so it is blowing out of the water what was asked of me, but it is, you know, a manga that is illustrated. Junji Ito is an exceptional storyteller. He writes his own stories, he illustrates his own stories, and they are usually absolutely nightmare fuel. There's one short story of his that I read. You know what? It might even actually be published in this collection somewhere, somewhere called The Enigma at Amigara Fault. And I read that story a couple of years ago, and I still think about it all the time, and it makes me want to barf and cry all at once. So Uzumaki is a horror about spirals. Spirals in the spiral into horror with Uzumaki. So I am really excited to see what he gives to us here. And this is a beautiful physical beautiful physical book. So I'm excited to read this, and I'm excited to be kind to myself for this challenge. Smart bitches are kind to themselves. And the final prompt for the readathon is to read the group book, which is The Graveyard Apartment by Mariko Koike. I have this on hold from my library, so fingers are crossed that I get it in time. If I get it from the library, I will read it. If I don't get it in time, I'll just read it another time. I might not make it for the readathon, but I will definitely read it. And apparently it fulfills all of the prompts except for the 400 pages or more, which I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that generosity, that kindness. So those are the 6 books, the 5 to 6 books that I will be reading for the Spooky Smart Bitch readathon. And now I am going to roll that D20 die a couple of times and see what I pick there. So the whole point of the D20 challenge is to make me actually read books that are on my physical shelf. Like, I always accumulate books. I'm always accumulating books, but this is like a dedicated, Alicia, you must read something that's on your own shelf instead of just going out and buying new books and reading those. I will always do that. I will always continue to do that. But this is like, I'm knocking 3 off per month, and it feels manageable, it feels doable, and it's working for me. So let's go roll a die. So the first roll to come up is 14, and that is to read an own voices narrative or a book with diverse representation. And I have a perfect book for this one that I was already hoping to pick up anyhow, so that is perfect. And that book is Notes of a Crocodile by Chu Miaojin. The reason why I wanted to pick this one up originally is because Bert over at Pastorytime is hosting a book club called My So-Called Book Club, where every 2 months they read a book from the 90s. So the July and August read was this one, and it sounded really interesting to me, and I really wanted to read it. So August fits in that window, so I will be reading it in August for this prompt. So this book was published in Taiwan in 1994. It is fiction, but it is very much mimicking the author Chu Miaojin's life. She was a very open lesbian in the 80s, and this book is, or I guess for her life, she actually led a very short life. This book was published in 1994, and Chu Miaojin sadly died in 1995. And this is kind of a coming of age story about a group of misfit teens living in post-martial law Taipei, just, figuring out their lives, doing what they want, just, living their true lives. This is like an instant cult classic when it came out. It has a bit of a cult following now. I don't think this was even published in English until 2017-ish when it was translated by Bonnie Huey. But yeah, so this is kind of a fiction coming of age story told through journal entries and like letters from the main character, Lazzy, but seems fairly autobiographical from Chu Miaojin's point of view. So I am super excited to read this, and thanks, Bert, for bringing this book to my attention. We're gonna do that 90s book club read. Now on to roll number 2. So the second roll was such a generous one. It is number 8, which is to read a short book, 250 pages or less. So let's just thank you Di for that. So this one is also awesome because there is another readathon that fits perfectly into this book. So I am just having a really good time with these rolls. So another book club that is happening starting this month is the Octavia Butler Slow Readathon, which is a, I think, 2.5-year long readathon starting now, where every 2 months we read a different book by Octavia Butler in publication order. So this readathon is hosted by Jerry at Onyx Pages and Musical Tati. I will link their channel and their announcement video below as well for this readathon. So yeah, so this is just meant to last like 2 or 3 years as we just slowly read through Octavia Butler's work, engage with it. And the first book in publication order, the first book that she published was Kindred. And I have already read Kindred. I read it a couple of years ago. I loved it. It was amazing. I highly recommend. And instead of rereading the physical book, I thought it would be fun to read the graphic novel adaptation, which is less than 250 pages. And so this is the graphic novel adaptation of Kindred that is adapted by Damien Duffy and John Jennings. I am assuming they did the illustrations and the writing for it. And this just, this looks amazing. I love a little graphic novel. I'm excited to get into this. So if you aren't familiar with the plot of Kindred, Kindred is about a Black woman named Dana living in the 90s, and then every once in a while, kind of mysteriously, she gets transported from the 90s where she lives into the antebellum South during like slavery times. And when she is there, the first time she goes there, she ends up saving this little white boy before she comes back to the present. And then each time she goes back in time, she is then again interacting with this boy again at different points in his life, and just trying to figure out what that connection is and how horrific and devastating it is for a Black woman living in the present to then to go back there and, you know, physically be a part of that terror of history. It is an amazing book, an amazing science fiction, speculative fiction story, so I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't read any Octavia Butler, and I am excited to read the graphic novel adaptation for that prompt. 2 readathons, 2 readathon book clubs with the dice. Woot! August is gonna be great. And now on to that third and final roll. So the third and final roll was a 7, and that is to read a non-fiction book. And I'm excited about this one as well because I have been super into memoirs right now. So for this, I will be reading All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. I picked this up recently and I really want to read it. So even though this is a fairly new to my shelf book, it's on my shelf, so it counts. All Boys Aren't Blue is a non-fiction YA memoir written by George M. Johnson, and is talking about, you know, his experience being Black and gay in America. The dust jacket says it weaves questions of gender, masculinity, brotherhood, family, and Black joy throughout these stories. So I am thrilled to get to this. I just read a book this month, also kind of following similar themes, called How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones, and that was exceptional. That was a 5-star memoir for me, so I am really excited to get to George M. Johnson's, and this cover is just beautiful. I can't stop looking at it. Oh. There you have it. Here are the 8, possibly 9 books that I am planning on reading in the month of August. Let me know what you are reading in August. Let me know if you are also doing the Spooky Smart Bitch Readathon. I am so excited about it. This is like one of my most anticipated readathons once it was launched. So let me know what you're reading. Let me know if you have read any of these. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being rad. Thanks for being great. And until next time, I'll see you now.